Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the Comix Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of May. It's May. Wow, yeah, Corona time is making me crazy. I don't know what time it is anymore, what day it is. It's insane. We've got such a good book to talk about this month. The book is Dancing After 10, and it's by VIVIAN CHONG and Georgia WEBBER. Both of whom we have the great deal of pleasure to be here. There's VIVIAN, there's Georgia.
Hello.
Good to see you both.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. I hope everybody's staying safe and healthy. We lost the picture again there, VIVIAN. But I hope you're all staying safe and healthy in this strange time.
Yeah, I think we're doing okay.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, we are doing okay.
Yeah. So here's my first question. It's always my first question, and because it's my favorite question. But why comics? Of all the things you could be doing in the world, of all the ways you could express yourself, of all the ways you could communicate, why is it comics that you chose for this work?
Because I think in picture. When I'm resting, everything is picture. When I close my eyes, it's visual. So there you go.
Yeah. Did you read comics before?
Definitely. Yeah. I read comic book and I read graphic novels when it first came out. When I first became not seeing, a lot of graphic novel just came out. And I really, really miss drawing. And I think there's no way after my surgery I don't document it in drawing. So that's how come.
Yeah. Did you have any experience drawing before then, VIVIAN?
Yeah, definitely. I studied fine arts and I did 3D animation for the TV industry for a while.
Oh, interesting.
And
okay.
then also make DVD, video editing, audio on small promotional film for private businesses. So yes, definitely thinking visual, want to document any meaningful things visually, and also capturing the characters by having thought bubbles. It's really meaningful way to express yourself.
Yeah, no, I agree very much, obviously. Georgia, why do you do comics? What is it for you that makes comics such a great medium?
It's interesting. It's like at the same time a very obvious question and answer to give, but then it's also like really, really hard to pin down. I mean, pictures mean a great deal to me as well. Images are really powerful, but I appreciate the sense of time more than anything, I think. And that the time is simultaneously guided by the person who creates the comic and also led by the person reading it. And you can really like spend your time soaking one moment in or flip backwards to return to something, that the story kind of, it's like always happening and you get to choose at what pace you take it in.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about comics too, and I think it's one of the things that really makes comics such a specific kind of art form is that audience participation at that level.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me. How conscious are you of that, Georgia, in terms of designing a page?
Extremely. I think my process is almost like primary. In my process, it's primary because I have an idea of the story. I know sort of what needs to happen. And then the next thing that I do before I actually even have like a script about what's going to be said on each page is write like little thumbnail maps so that I can see almost at a distance all of the layouts together and what the rhythm is going to be.
Yeah.
It's very much like I'm I'm trying to understand the sort of fluctuations of time, and by seeing all of the pages or as many of the pages as I can at once, to know this is going to be a very dense part of the book, followed by some more space, followed by this structure falling apart, and then here's where it's going to come back together. And it feels very much like a movement and like a time-based thing when I can see it all at once. And then after I've got the sort of general picture, then I go back and I start writing the pages.
Absolutely, absolutely. Vivian, when you say you think visually, and I can see it from your art. You know, those 12 or 16 or 20 pages, whatever it is at the beginning, you know, that you had drawn right after getting your vision back temporarily. They're very strong, and they're very visually strong, I think, as well. When you think visually, though, are you thinking sort of one panel unit at a time, or are you also sort of picturing it on a bigger page, the way it might be laid out?
I thank you very much, first of all. And the way I think is one scene at a time. I think in scene. So if 4 cells together make the scene, that's how I think the grouping would be, those 4 together.
Sure.
So to me, the rhythm is the cell, that how you tell the story, which scene come first. But in my mind's eye, when I close my eyes, it's a scene, one cell each time.
Yeah. Makes sense to me. Georgia, did you have any formal training in comics?
Formal is not how I would put it. I was really, really lucky in that when I became interested in comics, I was still in high school. It was the end of my last year, my grade 12. And there was actually a teacher at the school who was a drama teacher, but he was so obsessed with comics. And I was put together with him by another teacher who just thought, hey, you guys should talk. And while I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, I ended up deciding to stay at my high school for an additional year so that he and I could do an independent study in comics that we actually called media studies. So we sort of studied formally in the sense that we were really focused on that, but informally because it was just like me and this teacher kind of sitting in his office once a week, and he'd give me books to read and then we would talk about them. We did lots of dissecting. I had story ideas, and he sort of like, you know, pushed me to make them by basically saying I had to for my assignments. So I did get a chance to do what was essentially training. It was just like pretty unstructured, or rather structured specific for me.
Would you read comics as a kid?
Pretty much just Calvin and Hobbes until I was like, 18 or 19. Yeah, I was totally obsessed. It was actually a thing whenever I had time to spare and like nowhere to be, I would just like go to the bookstore and sit in one of their chairs or like in a corner just reading the Calvin and Hobbes books and then put them back and make my way.
Neat. Vivian, what you said you were reading graphic novels at one point. Do you recall like particular books?
Definitely. So I should start farther back. Actually, my first hands-on comic book is a Japanese comic book. The storyline is about this Western cowgirl, but it's written by a Japanese artist, and the stories by a Japanese artist. So I'm just looking at her depicting all these Western people who are cowboys, and I follow it all the way till the end. So each week I would just use my pocket money to buy one, and it will be translated to Chinese. So that was my first experience.
Interesting. Was that there in Canada? Yeah.
So I read this book when I was like 5.
Okay.
It's so many years ago. I'm sure if there are collectors, there would be a version, but it might still be in Chinese character or Japanese character.
Right.
Might not be translated.
Sure. Okay, and then as you grew up and you became a little older, what books were you reading then?
What books? Spider-Man,
Oh,
Man. It's very rare, so I wouldn't have pocket money to buy each of every episode. So I would buy one and randomly go to another superhero and buy another one. So that's how it goes for me. Very random.
interesting. It's really rare for me to hear from women tell me that when they were girls they read superhero comics. It's almost always, oh no, I read Calvin and Hobbes, or I read Peanuts, things like that. Very rare for me to hear superhero comics. I like that.
You know what I like about it is all the characters are very different from how I look. So I still live in a visual world, and back then even more. When I look at the superhero, they always having so much clothes on, but their skin tight. Oh, like just starting from that, it looks so different from Asian superhero or Asian man or woman.
Sure.
It's very interesting to look at the superhero and see what the Western world is thinking. What is their role model? What is make them cool in that society? So actually learn a lot from reading comic book, even just one episode here and there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting when I think about manga. One of the things that strikes me is that so much of it is drawn with some sort of a sensibility towards the Western audience, right? All the characters have very big eyes, which to me is a Western thing rather than an Eastern thing.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I remember all the Japanese animes making into comic book version. All the characters has huge eyes,
Absolutely.
and because of the penmanship is what they value back then when I was 5. Now it's more the page layout, the coloring, and the action, even the bubble design. But back then it was all the bubble looks the same. All the words are slap on. They're not really well designed, but it tells the story. And it's very basic, two tones, the animated comic book that I read.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's all about patterning. Like I remember there were so many patternings on other little cowgirls' clothing. That was really, again, to me, it's how it tells a story or the culture group. So when they tell cowboy story, I learned so much about this group of people, what they're doing. Yep.
That's interesting. I love it. One of the things I felt so powerful about Dancing with 10 was that it really brought me into your headspace in a really deep way. I felt the agony that you felt, being there in those hospital rooms and being alone and not knowing where your support system was, and yet I felt your hope and your strength. That of just how you could get through that. And that's, to me, the power of comics is being able to connect in that way, in a way that I don't get from prose and I don't get from films.
Yeah, you're right on the point. And emotion is very underrated. Emotion helps us to get through hurdles, like right now what we are going through, or back then when I was experiencing coma, suffering from third-degree skin burn and being poisoned and went blind. Yeah, it's all very emotional, and comic book helps me to tell the emotional journey. So I'm very thankful for that medium. Could just flow without saying all the in-betweens.
Georgia, was it hard to draw somebody else's pain so intently?
Yeah, that's the short answer. Yes, it's hard. It does involve a lot of imagination, and I think, like Vivian was saying, a lot of emotion. Like I couldn't just draw it dispassionately. Like I had to sort of try to imagine it for myself, and then also just take in, like, imagine it for myself so that I could place maybe like the depth of it in a feeling sense so that I could draw that. But also it was just really a lot of like whatever Vivian said, trying to take it just really seriously and thoughtfully, and then move from there and like hope that it communicates. I mean, I've said before already, I already kind of knew when I started that I wasn't going to succeed in telling Vivian's story as well as she would succeed on her own. But since that's not possible, at least in the way she wanted to do it, I just was doing my best to fill in that gap.
Yeah, were there any parts there that were easier or harder to draw? Or, you know, is there a way to be dispassionate about it, I suppose?
Is there a way? Yeah, I mean, some of it, because it's just being an observer. Like, you know, when I drew my book Dumb, I was trying to draw myself as someone else might see me, as well as conveying how it felt to be inside. And in this case, I didn't have to imagine looking at Vivian from the outside. I was just actually looking at her and going, okay, this is the document. This is how this is going to go. It was only trying to get into the harder stories. There are some, you know, really intense experiences that I did have to draw because Vivian did all of the hospital stuff. But then after the hospital, there's so much life that I had to get into. So yeah, I mean, I had to sort of do that balancing of like, first of all, taking what she said and then trying to find a way to connect my feeling to it, but also still clearly be like the observer because it is my story. It's Vivian's story. So I had to be like, those are separate things, and I'm someone over here taking a look at it and still making sense of it at that emotional level.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think, speaking as a middle-aged white American male, I don't think I could have handled this. I don't think if this had happened to me, Vivian, I don't think I could have gotten through it with a tenth of the grace that you display here. You're really strong, and I want to just sort of take a minute to acknowledge that you're really strong, and I'm really thankful that you shared this with us.
Wow, you are so sweet.
I'm just being honest. I
am just soaking it up. Thank you for the feedback and your compliments and having this dialogue and having my book for your club. I feel, you know, a lot of time when you go through, these days people always say trauma. There are so various different degree of trauma, if you name it, in the book. But in the end, you can hold all the grudges, you can be angry, and you can beat yourself up emotionally. But in the end, I feel like I have more life to live, and focusing on filling it up with things I could do and I love to do is important to me. And I cannot believe after so many things happen, my trust didn't waver. I just genuinely trust everybody, trust people, and trust society, and I trust the universe, and I trust my power. So, yeah.
Oh, that's great. It's interesting though, because I do see at least a moment or two of your own rage in the book. The sequence where I suppose she's a nun is trying to get you to put yourself in God's hands, or the blindness support group where you seem like you immediately go, well, this is not for me because they want to wallow in something, and I could see that part of that was like that just, no, I've got to be strong to go do this. Is that right? Or am I reading into it wrong?
Yes. No, I am so grateful you are such attention to details. For all this little emotional journey, it's only one cell or one scene. But it was me deciding, okay, they can help themselves in this way, but I believe there are so many other ways, and there will be a creative way to help myself. And I had no idea all these things would happen to me. So I'm definitely remembering all the emotional journey I going through moments by moments because they are so intense.
Yeah. Is it difficult to work on a project that you'll never be able to experience like the audience can?
I love your questions. I am surprisingly okay. Again, going back to trust. I trust if I have a wish, I have a way. And I trust good people and good outcome will happen to me. And and then it happens. And it happens. I can't say I'm positive every day, but it happens. So I don't know, trust, very important.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Georgia, let me pivot a little bit to your early career. Was Dumb was your first book, yes? Or am I missing something?
Oh no, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so to come out with your very first work, and I mean this is just as true for Vivian, obviously here for comics. To come out with something that's that kind of personal and painful and triumphant, yes, but to expose that part of yourself.
Hmm.
Were you at all scared about that? Did that make you nervous?
I am scared. But the thing is, if I don't create, I feel like the scare is wasted. So for me, having things happen to me doesn't have to be, and that's the story you tell. Um, I see it, it gives me a story to tell in an art way after I recover from whatever damage emotionally it has. I always turn that emotion into something meaningful, like an art form.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Does
Georgia,
that
how
answer your
about
question?
for you
Yes.
with Dumb? Because I suspect that the two things are fairly related.
Yeah, except that I actually did not feel any fear about sharing my experience so much as I was terrified that my comics were bad. I mean, and it's true that, like you see in Dumb, the drawing style really shift and the skill and the confidence come in the later half of the book because it truly was like that. Those comics were the first comics I'd made in a few years after I finished that really sweet year with the teacher post high school. Mostly because once I was on my own again, it was terrifying again. I didn't have the same kind of support, and I just sort of didn't know what kind of story to tell, and I was so uncomfortable with fiction. I'm still fairly uncomfortable with fiction. I find it really hard to convey someone else's experience, actually.
Well,
But
that's
taking
odd.
this
I genuinely think that's odd after reading Dancing with 10.
well, that's the thing. I would never have chosen a fiction story, and I think that's because trying to imagine a character and then imagine what they would say and do always felt just like so so strange and like it was sort of false, even though I mean I love reading fiction. Like I have no issue with other people doing it. It's just for my internal sense of like confidence in what I want to write or what I want to say. I'm much more interested in things that have actually happened and in how to translate them. So even though I was writing like Vivian's story very much, you know, with her input, but actually having to put her experiences on the page, it was still an investigation of truth and also of like her truth, like not my version of it, but actually still her story, the way that she experienced it. So it was writing someone else's perspective, but she also gave me the go ahead on everything and like changed words when they weren't right and asked for things to be different and like really, yeah, like it was created through her choices. So yeah, I don't feel I still don't feel drawn to fiction, and I'm still writing memoir. But Dumb and the present book that I'm working on, like they don't feel scary to me to share, and I can't exactly explain it. Like, I guess the work itself feels different enough from me, and when at the point that I'm putting it out there, it's already something that I've reflected on a lot. So it's, you know, carefully chosen, and there's like a lot of thought going into why it's being shared that way. But I don't edit things out for the sake of protecting myself. I just edit things so that the story really lands and makes sense, and the emotional component is like as true as it can be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't believe The Dumb was the very first piece of what they now call graphic medicine, which has become...
No, it's not the first,
Yeah, not by far the first, but it was, I think it was one of the first ones that that started a wider conversation.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
I mean,
and graphic medicine is really becoming a burgeoning subcategory in comics. There's probably 3 or 4 dozen books at least that are, you know, that are really solid, valid, wonderful books. Do you feel any... responsibility is not the right word. What do you feel about... Let me make that a neutral question rather than trying to lead it. What do you feel about this trend of graphic medicine, and how do you think it touches people?
sorry, is this one still for me? Because I'm
you start, Georgia. Yeah, 'cause you've got 2 books, so you know. Yeah, well, let's start with you on that one.
okay. I think it's amazing. I mean, I didn't make Dumb to be a graphic medicine comic. Like you said, it was sort of at the beginning of that burst of this new genre, and like I was told after the fact that I belonged to that community, and I was like, oh my god, more like me, more like this. That sounds amazing. Because I mean, I have always felt, and this is probably also partly an answer to your last question, that like our very specific experiences are extremely relatable because we all are experiencing health and conditions of health. Whether or not we acknowledge that is sort of a question of how you look at it, or how you feel it, how you acknowledge it.
Yeah.
But the more stories we have, the more we can actually acknowledge like health conditions are as unique as each of us, and we also share a lot in those things. We share those experiences, we share struggles and pain, and then we also have, you know, our very specific things that actually, you know, contain a lot about our experience, that when other people read them, it's both novel and so familiar. And I think we often carry a lot of shame about medical related, or just like, you know, our bodies, our experiences of feeling healthy. There's so much shame in that in our culture. So all the conversation, I'm very happy to see it growing, and for it to get more nuanced and more inclusive and more intelligent. It just, that's what we need the numbers for. We need more people to be invested and to start raising their voices about, you know, what matters to them and how to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I think it's amazing. That's my short answer.
Very nice. Vivian, how about you?
I think graphic medicine is genius. When we are vulnerable, such as being sick as a patient in a hospital, it's those unspeakable secrets people want to tell. So I think having a genre to tell those stories that are hidden and vulnerable, it's a very great platform.
Yes, I agree. Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you guys a question as Canadians. Because, you know, health is on everybody's mind right now, I think, because of the coronavirus. And there are, you go through things in this book that I think that if an American went through them, in terms of going back and having these other surgeries and sort of experimental treatments, those would bankrupt the average American. And yet, presumably you weren't paying anything for them because you're a Canadian, yes?
Halfway true.
Okay.
So there were one surgery that I did in Miami, and I have to fly there. It's the corneal and stem cell transplant. And at that time in Canada, there was no specialist on the cornea for a transplant. So I had to find ways to get to America. But there was a way. I found a doctor that wrote me basically a recommendation letter that I'm qualified for a grant for the surgery. So with all these paperwork, I actually had to fly to America for one of the surgery. If I don't have that coverage, that would already bankrupt me, that one surgery.
Yeah.
And there were many. So yeah, it's true. Our Medicare is superb and it really helps people here.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Georgia?
Oh God, no. The prospect of not having universal health care is like a nightmare to me. I haven't luckily needed the healthcare system as much as Vivian did for this experience. I actually mostly have been just kind of failed by not the system itself, but like the paradigm of the people who are working within it. And that in that, like, most of my problems would sort of fall into the category of just like anomaly. Like when a doctor talks about chronic pain, they're kind of like, well, it's idiosyncratic. We don't really know what you're going to need. You're going to have to figure it out. And we don't really have any ways to help you unless you want a drug to like knock your nerves out. So that kind of thing was never like, all the healthcare that I've received that has been most beneficial to me has come outside of that system. But at the same time, and you know, that's expensive, but at the same time, like I can't imagine living in a world where if I really did need a surgery or if there was some sort of accident on top of another experience, like, you know, anybody living with a chronic condition also has the possibility of having an emergency. So I mostly just feel a lot of compassion for people who are living with any kind of fear around the choice of, do I seek the care I need or not? Like, it just sounds awful.
Yeah, but I have to say that it is very difficult as American living through this coronavirus time, because, you know, even to go just for a routine checkup right now, I'm like, I don't want to go because I might get this other disease, and I know that won't be covered, you know?
Yeah.
It's scary
Actually,
stuff.
when I was going through 10, what happened to me in the story, it is something really unknown and it happens so rarely. Nobody know what would happen to my eyes. In fact, I didn't open my eyes for the time I was in a coma, so nobody knew I couldn't see. I just know that I feel blurry, but they didn't know it would cause my eyesight and my hearing as well.
Yeah, that's scary. That's terrifying.
It's scary.
I can't even imagine it. I mean, I can't imagine it because I have the book here and I can see, but it scares me. I don't know. Let me ask something happier. Is Chaser still with you?
Catcher.
Catcher,
He
sorry,
is-
Catcher. I meant to say
Yes.
that. Yeah. Yeah?
No problem. Yes, he is sleeping currently.
Very good.
Yeah, he doesn't talk much, you know. He doesn't bark. He just maybe a small yawn. You can hear him yawn. That's it.
Oh,
Very
nice.
quiet.
Very nice. Very nice. How long have you had him? I wasn't really straight on the timeline here.
No problem. I have him now. He's 6 years old, and I've been having him since he's 1.5.
Wow. 5 years.
And
Yeah.
he's American. He's from California.
Nice. California
Yeah.
dog. Nice. That's very good. Okay, let's talk about a book like, okay, so we'll talk about the craft part in a minute, but I'm always interested in the business part of comics. So at some point, you and wait, I've forgotten names here because I'm a terrible person. You and Kathleen thought that it would be a good idea to do this as a book, as a graphic novel. So how did you find Georgia to draw it? And then how did you guys find Fantagraphics to be the publisher?
Okay, so I was producing a dance show in Toronto, so I have to show my friend Kathleen. Well, she was a very new friend, so she doesn't know anything about me, but would decide to collaborate. And so I need to tell her my life story through the best way, which is my own drawing. So I gave her the first version of Dancing After 10, which is 102 pages. I drew it and I had a document and I gave it to her. And at the meeting, she read it in one go and she read it again. And she just can't believe this wouldn't take it to who I am today. Because all the stuff that I could see and drew then was that same style, and it was before the accident happened. So she wanted to see that the life story carry through, not only in the dance piece, but in this comic book. So we start looking for artists in Toronto, and then we find Georgia, and she was the first one and the only one I interviewed, and we from there talk about how we're gonna make it feasible. Me giving her different audios clips of different scene happen in my life in different angle and different characters, and she draw after that. So it was quite a process.
Yeah, yeah, and did you guys do the book and complete the book and then try to sell it, or were you trying to find publishers before then? What was the process there?
So as I am proposing to Georgia what this project is about and what kind of audience we are appealing to and why is it important to tell my story, then she also make a proposal to Fantagraphic, and then together we submit, and then they really like it, and that's how it began.
Very good. Georgia, you brought it to Fantagraphics, assumingly because of them publishing Dumb. I have to assume
Yeah.
that's the logical connection there. Let's back up 5 steps there. How did you come to bring Dumb to Fantagraphics?
That was a kind of nice series of, I guess, kind gestures. So I was visiting Seattle just because I wanted to, and I had a few issues of the serial version of Dumb, just these small, like, mini comics. There were about 20 pages each. I was numbering them, so I had, I think, Dumb 1 to 4 out at that point, and I was visiting the West Coast, so I was like, okay, I'll do Seattle, and I'll go to the Fantagraphics bookstore, and I'll have a little, like, launch event, and they were so gracious. It was really nice. While I was there, I was staying with someone who worked at Fantagraphics, and she allowed me to come to the office with her because I had some freelance work to do and I needed a scanner. So it was just a really nice thing that I was able to get some work done, and I got to see the cool house that Fantagraphics lives in. And then I left my copies of my comics there as a gift, just to say thanks, and I left them for Gary, I guess. I can't remember if they were specifically for him or if he just ended up reading them. I don't know, but I was trying to say thank you because I was so happy to have had the space to work. And then, like a month or two later, I got an email from Gary, and I hadn't given him my email address, so I guess he like found it, and that was like sort of exciting to me that he wanted to reach out. And he just said like, oh, I think these are really great, and I really like what you're doing with the sort of introductions at the beginning that are talking about aspects of voice, and it's like this cool form of activism. So like, keep up the good work. Like, nice to meet you. And I was just like, wow, that's amazing. Like, what a cool compliment from this publisher who I'd love to work with. But I just sort of said like, oh, thanks so much, and left it at that. And then like a year or two later, when I had 8 issues out, Jack Cohen, the publicist there, got acquisition powers and sort of rushed up to me at an event and was like, Georgia, who's publishing your book?
So I was going to ask about the dance though, and so I'm assuming, and perhaps again I'm not right, but I'm assuming because it was supposed to be in April that did it perform? It probably didn't
No,
perform.
we were very close to the first show. We had 3 more weeks to go only. And then my co-producer decided to cut it out and let everybody judge. She was doing it before the government even, so then we storage. And so that's the status right now. And we return all the tickets from the show and people said about it and they were really.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm very intrigued by the idea. Is there going to be able to mount the production when we come back from this virus, do you think?
Gary Mann may be a different way to represent it because we had 9 people on stage at time, so that would break the law.
Yeah.
Yep, so no idea, but I'm open to anything that would happen about the show.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super curious to see a dance performance about blindness. That fascinates me as an idea. The same way that the comic did. It's such an unusual way to tell the story, and again, you can experience it. That's the part that it trips me out is the wrong phrasing, but it astonishes me that, again, you can't appreciate a dance performance. I mean, you can hear the footfalls, I suppose, and you can feel the rhythm of the music, but that's not quite the same thing? Or is it?
Okay, first, I feed from people's energy. If you see a dance show, I'm performing, you give me feedback in the air or little gasp, little sound. It makes me understand how important I am. Same for comic book. Like you read my book, you like different little plots and you just told me. It just fill me up with energy. I'm not attached to the outcome, but I'm attached to the process. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, no, I very much do. That's a beautiful way of putting it. That's a very, very beautiful way of putting it.
Yep. And I just love the irony of I begin with an artist and I lost my sight and I go back to use the medium. People think I have no right or cannot do. And I show it to people the before and after. So I still draw, and we might even intentionally select drawing that are extremely abstract to represent what I want to say. But it doesn't, a different ability doesn't take your personality away. So you will still be able to alter what you're doing with a different way. Or different appreciation altogether. So my appreciation through my comic book is through you. Then I understand what I'm doing and who I am. So thank you for reading it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I liked it well enough, and the whole staff, because we vote on these books. The staff read all the manuscripts, and then we vote on which one that we like the best each month. And it was I want to say a unanimous vote. Maybe it wasn't unanimous, but it was really close to unanimous. Everybody loved it. Everybody was very touched and could feel what you were feeling and understand your point of view, which is the greatest thing I think you can do as an artist, is to show some of your point of view and make them feel it as well.